Welcome to Ethics. I'm Tom, and today we are talking about the Ring of Gyges. This is from Plato's Republic. It's a particular story, kind of myth that gets raised in the beginning of Book 2 of the Republic. And in some ways, it's kind of a thought experiment to advance the position of or entertain the position of Thrasymachus. So we will recall that Thrasymachus makes this kind of rather strong claim about ethics, and he claims that justice is the advantage of the stronger, or the interest of the stronger. And this is can be kind of captured in the slogan that might is right. That the people in power kind of write the rules, and they write the rules to serve their own interests, right? Um, and this is also kind of entails the idea that our sense of kind of absolute um, standards or measures of right and wrong, absolute kind of ethical ideals that are universal in scope that apply to everyone the same, is really unfounded. And he thinks actually we're probably just being duped into believing something like that because people in power have been making the rules in their favors for a long time, and it serves them to make us believe that, right? The kind of common folk. Um, so, um, so based on this, in beginning of book 2, there is this issue of the Ring of Gyges, right? And so this is a mythological story, where this character has finds a ring, and the ring, when you turn it, it makes you invisible, right? And the question is, if you had that ring, what would happen? What would you do? And I believe, if I remember correctly, in the story, the person who has the ring uses it for all kinds of bad stuff, right? And gets into a lot of trouble. And the proposition here is that Thrasymachus is really right, because if you did not have the kind of common consequences that we have for acting unethically, which are things like you break the law, you go to jail, people get mad at you, all kinds of stuff like this, um, uh, then you would act purely out of self-interest and just do all the bad things that you always wanted to do, because you don't have any consequences. Right. And so the idea is that from Thrasymachus, that being just or good is always a burden, right? And that no one really be good or just in the kind of common sense idea of that, if you didn't have to be, right? And the Ring of Gyges is an instance in which, is a hypothetical situation in which you wouldn't have to be, and the question is like, what would you do? Um, Now, I like to just kind of explore this idea um, in a number of ways. I think it just raises an interesting thought experiment, and there are a couple of issues with it. There's one question about whether or not the assessment of how one would act when having the ring is really accurate, right? Would people really do all kinds of unjust things? Um, I think there's good reason to think that a lot of us would not do all kinds of things, because either a sense of how you feel, your own kind of just ethical sensibility that you wouldn't be able to shake. But also, there's lots of unethical things that would be bad for you, right? Things like you have all kinds of inadvertent consequences for doing certain unethical behaviors. So things like, sexual assault or murder or stuff like this can be traumatizing for someone, even if they perpetrate those kind of crimes. There's all kinds of things. There's certain things that you wouldn't steal, right? Because you don't even want them, right? There's all kinds of like unethical activities or behaviors that you wouldn't do because they actually really don't align with your self-interest, right? There are all kinds of psychological concerns that some people just wouldn't want to do it, or maybe you have a fear that maybe the ring's powers will wear off when you're in the middle of doing something really bad or something like this. There's lots of questions about whether this is accurate. There's also questions about to what extent the Ring of Gyges shows up actually in our real world in various guises, right? And one example um, that actually I think ends up being in line with Thrasymachus's view is something like very large corporations, right? Oftentimes, corporations and the kind of head executives are very insulated, right? In terms of the kind of unethical actions that they might do, right? They have huge legal teams. They're very hard to get a hold of. They have all kinds of buffers in place, legal and kind of logistical buffers, and which leaves them able to make certain kind of unethical decisions and with the business and the way in which they conduct business, and that kind of acts as where they're still kind of like shielded and insulated from consequences. And as it turns out, um, we see a lot of businesses, large businesses, um, nowadays where people, do lots of unethical things, when it comes to the environment or when it comes to, how they treat consumers, all kinds of things like this. And also there is the sheer fact of money, right? Money can function like a ring of Gyges, right? If you have so many billions of dollars, you can really get away with quite a bit in our current society, because again, you're very insulated from things. And um, so I think those are and also you see of those kind of people. People go in very different directions with their lives, right? Not everyone acts very unethically, and so this raises a lot of different issues. It's an interesting thought experiment, and the main question here is really like to what extent it really does support Thrasymachus's view, and does it kind of give some kind of twist to it, or does it kind of deepen his view? Does it give it more kind of real world applicability, and say whether or not really people would act out of self-interest only, or whether people would naturally be selfish, left to their own devices. So anyways, something to simply ponder at this point. As we move forward, we'll look at a bunch of different other ethical theories. So that's it for today. Thank you.